everyone. Good evening. Let's jump right in. So I think where I wanted to start this session was how to build Claude skills. One of the things that I realized while building sort of some of the Claude skills is most of what I can do usefully in Claude skills primarily comes from another skill, which is prompt engineering. So think of it like, so prompt engineering came first, right? A little bit of history around that. So prompt engineering came first, and this is basically how to give instructions to computers. So if you have to sort of find a definition of prompt engineering, it will be basically create the right prompt to get desired outputs from LLMs, which is almost saying as like, how do you sort of instruct computers? Just a moment. Which is just to say how to instruct computers. Now, when you go after instructing computers, over time, like what happened and where plot skills kind of comes in is all of the useful prompts are actually like pretty large. So if you have to write a really good prompt about how to write a PRD, you can either sort of go to Claude and you can ask it a very simple question. Can you write me a PRD X, right? So this is a very simple prompt. And this will do a decent job. Like this will not do the best job possible, but this will do a decent job. But if you really want to get good output from LLMs, you have to write almost like write a skill for writing a PRD. So it's basically write me a prompt to write a PRD. So you first write a prompt to write a PRD, and then you give context of like, what do you need to write PRD around along with this prompt, and then you can get some useful output. So one of the problems with instructing computers is the instructions tend to be large. Now, if they're large, whenever you're doing your own work, you're not going to borrow these large instructions. So I, for one, like have tried to maintain a file of all the instructions and all that. And over time, I just lose track of it. I'm not able to refine it. I'm not able to update it based on models and based on the sort of tools that I'm using. And this problem, the team at Anthropic actually realized, and what they said was, let's build something to solve this problem. Not the problem of writing good prompts, but the problem of using good prompts. And the problem of using good prompts is ultimately like translating into Claude skills. So Claude skills, if you have to sort of learn, the best place to actually learn is to go through Claude. Like one of the things that Anthropic does really well as compared to other hyperscalers or AI labs is it writes in very simple language how to use a particular product that they have launched. Right, so they have this entire section of agent skills where they write about how to use skills, how skills work, and all that. Now, one of the things that you'll realize is the way they define is the skills is agent skills are modular capabilities that extend Claude's functionality, right? And this definition, modular capability, primarily comes from the system prompt or the prompt. So this prompt engineering, where we sort of like started this entire revolution of LLMs at, finally got systematized through Claude skills, which is, it is like prompt plus plus, but ultimately it's basically a set of prompts stored as .md files. And these like .md files are getting borrowed by sort of Claude. Now the question becomes, what is .md file? .md file is nothing but markdown files. So show me an example of .md file. And you'll be able to sort of find numerous examples of markdown files. So this is a markdown file, right? You take a markdown file, you put it in a HTML sort of parser, and it will show you like the header and everything. But if you look at the raw file, it will look something like this. This is like closer to the code than it is to sort of readability wise, like it's closer to code, but you can always convert it into HTML and then sort of but this is basically like in very, very natural language. What you're trying to do is you're storing your prompt, and then that prompt is kind of extending the capability of Claude, basic Claude model. And which is why like it's extremely important. So this is the easier part, actually. Claude skills is the easier part, like knowing what Claude skills is and sort of how to use Claude skills. The more difficult part is, even if you learn Claude skills, it will be of no use if you don't understand how to write really good prompts. And I think, which is why for today's session, let's focus on prompt engineering. And then skills will be possibly like 15 minutes topic, not more than that. Like, so we can cover in next session. And we can also show step by step how to build skill. Today, I'm going to focus on how to build your system prompt step by step. Okay. So prompt engineering is the art of communicating. Now, writing good prompts, if you see, for example, if I ask you write a prompt to create comprehensive PRD, let's go here. Like rather than sort of teaching a theory, ask it to write a prompt to create a comprehensive PRD. The way, by the way, these models behave even 3 months back is very different than the way they behave right now. So right now, I think the Claude's most sort of useful model, which is like 4.6 or 4.7, it is almost behaving like how Chat PRD or all these tools for writing PRDs behave, which is it will ask you useful questions. It will then start writing PRD for you. So in a way, like the kind of PRD that you could ship 6 months back is very different as compared to what you can ship today. And even this kind of, right, rather than writing a prompt, it intuitively understands that it's better to write this in a markdown file. Why? Because the markdown file can then be stored as a skill. And that skill can be borrowed within the Claude window to write better PRDs. Now, when you write a PRD like this, my question is, so you have written a prompt to write a PRD, right? So this prompt looks this large. And this is why I was saying, now you can store this prompt somewhere. And whenever you have to write a PRD, you can just borrow this prompt. That is one way of doing it, borrow the prompt. The second way of doing this is you don't borrow the prompt, you just kind of keep a window. For example, this window, this particular chat window is just for PRDs. So you start here and then you keep coming back to this chat box. You star them and all that, and then sort of you come to them and you keep using them. The problem with chat box is the context becomes very large, in which case you start losing a lot of, like it starts hallucinating quite a lot. The response quality degrades. The problem with storing it into a folder is we are too lazy to sort of go back again and again and keep bringing back to the main things. Now, if those, so that is where the skill comes in, by the way. Skill primarily solves a behavior problem for humans. It less so solves anything which was not possible with, let's say, Claude or all these LLMs before. It is not a new thing to be added, like prompt engineering or reasoning models or those sort of things. So skills is more like on the application layer, you can say it's more to solve our behavioral problems, our product problem. It's there to solve product UX rather than sort of solving a very fundamental problem with the product, which prompt engineering, reasoning models, and a lot of fine tuning and everything sort of solves, right? But now the question that you need to understand before you learn prompt engineering, the question that you need to understand is what makes a prompt great. So you have the objective function. You know that like a very simple answer is the thing that makes a prompt great is whether it achieves a particular outcome or not. And with that definition, the biggest problem is if I ask like 5 of you on whether this is a great prompt or not, you will fail to answer that question consistently. So that consistency will be missing. And part of the reason is the kind of PRD that I need is a very different kind of PRD than somebody else needs in this room. And given that like different people have even different expectations from how a PRD should look like, different organizations, first of all, have different expectations from how a PRD looks like. Every org has their own structure. Given that even within an org, like while I worked in Flipkart, there are like hundreds of PMs who worked at Flipkart. And my way of writing PRD could be very different than somebody else's way of writing PRD. And which is why you don't see a lot of PRD templates succeeding in the market. Even if like people keep sharing like this is a good PRD template, this is how you should write PRD, you'll end up realizing that we read read these posts, and then we come back and we still write the PRDs the way we used to write. And part of the reason is because for a PM, for different PMs, different PMs have different strengths and weaknesses. For most of the times, in the areas we are very strong at, we don't need a lot of guidance, or we don't even need LLMs to sort of write or do that for us. But then there are other areas which are actually weaker for us, and which is why like a custom PRD template or custom PRD skill actually makes a lot of sense for a lot of PMs, right? If you understand that, what you end up realizing is when it comes to personal productivity, when it comes to building products, of course, there is a one system prompt and you're going to apply that to that product. But when it comes to building your own AI Copilot or building your own productivity tool, you cannot borrow it from somebody else. And that was the genesis of this entire series, which is you can't borrow your AI Copilot from somebody else. You can't buy it in $50, $100, $200, and you can just port it and you can start using it. It does not work like that because there will be too much of redundancy in that particular prompt when it comes to your org, your own preferences, your taste, and all that. Okay. So with that context, now the question becomes, do you want to be like Iron Man, who can build Jarvis in a much, much, much better fashion because he is fundamentally an engineer? Or do you want to be somebody who has been given this really powerful thing, but they don't know how it works, right? And most of you would, of course, want to become Iron Man, not because he is cool, but because you understand that if you know something deeply, it just makes you very, very effective at using it. And hence, if you have to write your own prompt, you have to first understand what prompt engineering is, because that is precursor to skills, that is precursor to everything that we do. That is precursor to your entire AI Copilot. Okay. So let's start with very simple thing like 80-20 of prompt engineering. And 80-20 of prompt engineering is a really good place to start. And the reason is because by spending 20% of time here, you can get 80% of the benefits. Or in fact, that's not true. By spending 20% of your time there, you can write prompts better than 80% of people. That's how I'll define it in this case. And the reason I'll say 80% of people is because as PMs, I believe the bar is way higher as compared to like general people. But this is basically as compared to general people, you'll be able to spend like 20% of time and write 80%, the prompts better than 80% of people. Now, this, of course, like this is something that you have seen shared across social media quite a lot, which is like, if you want to write a perfect prompt structure, you have to talk about the role, you have to talk about the task, which is create a PRD. And even here, you'll start with saying that you are an expert prompt manager, write a PRD, which is, let's say, premium filters in Blinkit. This is a case study I keep using across my sessions in AI product management as well. So task, then there is context. What is a context? You can add context depending on like what you feel is good for writing this PRD. The filter does not exist. In the in any players yet. We aren't sure if we should launch it. I want to see how the product requirements look. Decide. Let's say this is like you're doing very, very exploratory sort of product requirement document. You talk about the format and then do not exceed. Because it's exploratory, you'd want to contain it, right? More than 1,000 words. So this is the some limitations or format that you're giving. And you can also say one of the PRDs that you can refer is product and PRD. Not this. This. There's one of the few PRDs which are like decent and available on internet. So let me do this, okay? And I've given this just like by following the simple checklist. What you'll end up realizing is your PRD is actually like better, more aligned to your needs, right? Because that is the goal we are chasing. It should be more aligned to your needs. I like product and format. You might not like it because this is very minimal. And I like minimal PRDs. Like I like PRDs which are like 1 or 2 pages long. That's it. Now, the thing is, so this is basically like, this is too much to remember, by the way. So I'll make it simple for you, right? What you should remember is STAR framework. You start with the persona, the role, and then you use STAR. You talk about situation, which is the context. You talk about the task, situation, task. You talk about action. What do you want it to do? For example, limit it to 500 words, be critical, be creative, and all that action. And then what is the result? Which is again like, what do you exactly want? Here you can add an example. This is how it should look like. You can talk about the format and all that. But persona plus star is something that you can remember. This is something that you folks have trained your brain in. So this is something that you'll be really, really good at, like persona plus star framework. So start here, and I think you'll be writing prompts soon, like better than most people. So that's the first part, writing your first prompt. Now let's get into like a little deeper and how to sort of write a 99th percentile prompt rather than 80th percentile prompt. So before you go there, like you need to understand that prompts are of two kinds. First is sort of system prompt. Sorry for that. The first is the system prompt, and the second is the user prompt. Okay. So user prompt is what I just wrote. This is user prompt. Okay. This is user prompt, and when this is going to Anthropic servers, a large system prompt is getting attached to this, whatever I wrote. So this gets attached to like Claude system prompt. And then whatever you see here comes out of that entire thing. And which is why you'll realize if you're building AI products, when you take the same prompt that you are writing in Claude chat and you use Anthropic APIs to sort of hit their servers and get the output looks quite different in some cases and somewhat similar in some cases. And the reason is because you don't have Anthropic system prompt when you're hitting their APIs. You have Anthropic system prompt when you are sort of chatting with this. Is there like some other sort of system prompt with their naked APIs? Of course there is, right? There has to be safety and all those things they have fine-tuned and they have built that. At the same time, chat is more designed for, for a B2C product. API is more built like a B2B product. And in B2B product, they want to leave a lot of control. They don't want to write a system prompt that does not give you a lot of control. In B2C product, they want to keep it very, very controlled so that anybody can use it. And when anybody, this does not mean PMs. When they say anybody, it means that somebody who does not know even the basics of writing prompt can use it, which means it has to be very, very comprehensive, the system prompt. Right now, you have this particular PRD for you, written for you. And if you ask me, right, I'll never write PRD like this. And the reason is because there are some, I don't actually, organically, I don't write PRDs like this. I like to sort of think about problem, talk about problem. I like to sort of think about the goals, talk about the goals. I like to think about solutions and different variety of solutions. I like to think about like what is the metric and what should be the right metric. This one shot thing does not work for me at all. And which is why like I'm going to show you, like when we build this skill, I already have that skill built for me to write PRDs. The way I have built the skill for writing PRD for myself is a very, very Socratic way of writing PRDs. It is supposed to sort of talk to me, like chat with me like a APM who is writing a PRD or a PM who is writing a PRD. And it will start with sort of defining the problem well. Then it will go to sort of user insights, hypothesis. And it is not asking questions because see, if it asks you 20 questions, it gets very, very boring, very, very fast. It is supposed to come up with intelligent assumptions. It is saying that this feels right, this feels right. In certain areas, it gives me 5 options. And then it says that, what do you think? And progressively, it will keep sort of appending those things into the final master PRD. And the reason I love it is because that is the workflow that works for me when it comes to writing PRD. Something else might work for you, right? I'm like, if I don't believe in like 16 personalities test, but most of the times I sort of fall between debater or protagonist. So I'm a debater. Like I will actually look at a problem. Even if I'm convinced of the problem, I tend to sort of go on the other end and I will say that really, does this problem really exist or not? Right. So I tend to sort of create both narratives and I enjoy that, right? That's who I am. That's my personality. So I don't feel it like a lot of people might feel it like this is dreadful to do. And that's totally fine, which is why I'm saying you should be building your own skill. And the way I'm going to do it is like sort of teach you how to build your own custom skills so that like you can benefit from it. So now the thing is, we talked about user prompt. So user prompt is what I'm writing, or if you're building an AI product, what somebody else is writing. System prompt is something that the person who has built that product has written. And system prompt always depends on top of user prompt. It sets the behavior, tone, constraints for system. Whereas user prompts is there to sort of get requirements from the user, what the user wants us to do. Once you understand it, I think you start searching for how like great prompts look like. For example, if you go to Bolt's prompt, you'll see like this is written like such a large prompt and such a structured prompt, isn't it? And the thing is like there are like other sources and Anthropic has shared its own. So this is very legit because Anthropic has shared its system prompt. Right? What is the system prompt for Cloud 4.7 and all that? And by reading these, the best way to learn how to write good large system prompts or how to build your cloud skills, for which you'll need to write good large system prompt, is to read these system prompts. So that is the best way to learn. So after this session, I would suggest like you go and you actually sort of read some of these system prompts. And while you're reading it, I want you to give I want to give you like the roots and trunk and branches of the knowledge that you need to read these system prompts well, so that when you're reading them, you have a pre-existing mental model on which you can dissect them, right? So that is what the next section is going to be. Uh, so if you want to dissect any system prompt, like something like this or something like this, you need to understand prompt engineering techniques. And we are not talking about like basic techniques like star format and persona. We are talking about very advanced techniques that are available. For most of their part, they're available only in research papers. These techniques are not like shared because, again, like I said, if you want to move to 99th percentile, you have to sort of reach towards the boundary of the knowledge and then push that boundary a little. That's how like PhDs, that's what PhDs do. That's where research papers come in, right? So research papers are a really useful source of these. And let's talk about some of the things which actually are really good. And then I'll also give you reference to read a research paper if you want and go deeper into this, right? So one thing that works very well is role prompting. So if you just take out expert product manager, this PRD will look a little different. If you take out like persona, it looks a little different. And over time, what has happened is that factor has stopped mattering, at least in chat GPT or Claude. And the reason is because a PM out there just is thinking of solving this problem at scale. And they're like, not a lot of people are going to write about personas, right? So because not a lot of people are going to write their prompt as act as a product expert, act as a marketing expert, what we can do is we can look at a problem, like look at what the user is saying. We can quickly classify it into a persona. We can assign a persona, and then I can create a dynamic prompt along with system prompt and user prompt. So a really clever AI product manager will actually start thinking in this direction, which is system prompt is fixed, user prompt is at the mercy of user. But what if based on the user prompt, I expand that user prompt by adding some dynamic input into that? And this is like a no-brainer, right? If you're a PM actually managing that product, you will think it like that. You would say that I'm going to assign role based on like whatever the user is asking. As long as I can classify and my classification confidence is more than 80%, 90%, I can do that. There are places where I cannot classify. There are kind of jobs where I should not classify. For example, somebody is asking for what is the calorie count of 5 bananas. I don't need to assign it a role, isn't it? Like it can just simply be like the calorie in 5 bananas is this much. So role prompt is also something. So one of the things you'll realize is the more we know about prompt engineering, the more you'll realize over time people have good AI PMs, which are sitting in these hyperscalers. They have started integrating them into the product in an invisible manner. Okay. So don't be surprised if your prompt works the same. The reason I'm telling you this is don't be surprised if at places assigning a persona does not change anything. And in other places, assigning a persona changes something. And that's because you are working with a wrapper. If you hit, let's say, naked APIs with a persona and without persona, they will behave differently for sure. Okay. Another technique, and by the way, like you don't need to remember these techniques, just understand on why these techniques are important. And so why am I teaching these? And second, like what should you be looking at when you are thinking about these techniques? Those should be your ideas. So if you understand, like if you learn how to separate good techniques for you versus bad techniques, I think you would over time accumulate a set of techniques that will be useful for you. But if you don't have that fundamental skill, you'll just look at these tactical techniques, you learn them, and it will be, of course, better than like not learning them at all. But it will not be like 10x more effective from here on. Okay, so Zero shot and few shot is one of my favorite techniques. And zero shot is basically you don't provide any example. For example, if I give a question, a juggler can juggle 16 balls, half of the balls are golf balls, and half of the golf balls are blue. How many golf balls are there? I have not given it any example on how to solve this problem. So it will give me an answer which is 8. But I can make it few shot, which is I have given one answer, and then I'm giving it another question and asking for answer. Even though in few shot, by the way, this makes this mistake, and which is where it shines with another technique, which is called chain of thought. Chain of thought is nothing but think step by step or solve the problem step by step. Chain of thought is something that you teach when you're teaching mathematics or physics in uh, primary or secondary school sort of students. It's the same thing with LLMs. What you do is you kind of say that this is how this problem was solved, right? This is how this problem was solved. Now solve this problem. This is few shortcut. You're giving one example, which kind of tells it to think step by step and solve the problem. And then you ask a question and it will solve the problem the right way. So this is correct. There is also zero shortcut, where rather than giving an example, you are asking it to think step by step. And you'll be surprised that just telling LLMs to think step by step actually improves their outcomes. By the way, it's the same thing that happens with humans. If I give you a question and give you the prompt to think in a structured manner, think step by step, I have seen that people tend to improve their answers quite a lot, both in interviews and in real discussions, right? So prompting actually works for LLMs. So does it work for humans. But there's a very simple example. This is again borrowed from a paper, which is few shortcut or zero shortcut. Chain of thought is very, very useful prompt technique. Few shortcut is very, very useful prompt technique. Now, my question to you could be like, where do you find this useful? Like, where will a PM apply this? Especially the COT technique. Examples you understand. Where can we apply COT? Just like put it in chat, and I'll pick it from there. Market sizing, yes. And the reason is it's a reasoning problem. It's something that if I ask you what is the market size of e-commerce in India, and you'll be like this much. Versus if I ask you what is the market size of e-commerce in India, think step by step. First of all, you will be able to come up with some questions, some really good questions, rather than answering it directly. Because when you think step by step, you start your reasoning brain. When you're not thinking step by step, you are not using your reasoning brain. And this is exactly what happens in LLMs also. Whenever you have to do some analysis, data analysis, whenever you have to do some complex problem solving, that is where chain of thought is actually useful. Okay. Now, another technique which is very, very useful is using delimiters. So when you are writing a prompt to the LLM, a lot of people will start like, write a PRD for me, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Here is an example. And they paste this PRD example. And then they will say, by the way, like, do not exceed these many words and blah, blah, blah. Like you write it in a way which is incomprehensible for a human. My question is, how is a computer going to understand it? And even if it understands most of it, what are the chances that it's not going to make a mistake? And the answer to that is delimiters. Basically, do the right formatting for a really large prompt. And if you see these, you can see delimiters. You can see these tags, and it has a lot of tags. If you see, go down, you see tags. You'll see end of tag also. This is end of tag. So this entire Claude prompt uses a lot of tags. And the reason is because tags help you separate sections. If you go to bold, what you'll also realize is this is really well formatted, right? This also has places where it says important, important, important. It has like headings. So in a way, like think of, and then there is of course tags. In a way, think of these like their guidance for how to read your system prompts. When you are pasting a PRD, you put them within like delimiters, or you do some visual separation like section breaks, or best like use tags. Tags are extremely easy to use and extremely useful. Like you can just use tags everywhere and you'll be able to give really, really good instructions, large but good instruction to the LLMs, right? So using delimiters will make you like at least twice effective when it comes to writing larger prompts and executing them. So very simple example is act as expert PM, write a PRD around filters in fashion category for an e-commerce app. This is the context, and context is within tag. And then there is sample PRD attached, and there is this PRD, isn't it? A really good way of going deeper into this is go here. Okay, maybe they just removed it. Prompt tools. Yeah, there's prompt templates and variables here, right? You can go like deeper into this if you want from here on. Just change it so that I'll change it later. So chain of thought we have already covered. Zero shortcut. And COT, like by the way, like we'll cover this later on, but it goes without saying, like COT is the like starting point of reasoning models. So the models became earlier it was just like text prediction. The models became intelligent after reasoning models. So all the thinking models, COT is what powers them, and which is why you see like when you start a thinking models, it starts like it feels like it's thinking. It's generating a lot of tokens, which will not be used, reasoning tokens, which will not be shown in the final sort of answer it produces. And yet still like reasoning tokens are important because it's basically thinking before speaking, which yields much better benefit. Right. The next like technique, which is very, very sort of useful is self-consistency. And this is also something that we have done in our sort of preparation for competitive exams and other things. And this is basically ask it to generate multiple answers, right? So again, the research finds that when you ask it to generate the best answer versus when you ask it to generate multiple answers, multiple ways of solving the problem, what happens is it looks at multiple ways of solving the problem. And then whatever is the most sort of whatever like is the majority, it just picks that. Because if a problem is solved in three different ways and two of the ways actually give the same answer, the answer is actually accurate. And this also increased the efficacy or accuracy of the systems, right? So self-consistency, while this can be used when, by the way, like this can be very well used if you're AI PM. And if you're building, let's say, an AI tutor or something which requires higher levels of reasoning. For example, when you're building a tool for PMs only. Sorry. For example, when you're building a tools for PMs only, it requires a higher levels of reasoning. And because it requires a higher levels of reasoning, you want to make sure that you employ, let's say, self-consistency so that it can think in two or three different ways. And then whatever is the pattern it's getting most of the times, it actually throws that in front of users. Now, the downside of this is when you go for tokenomics, this just is 3x more expensive. But again, depending on the use case, the end user might be willing to pay you a higher price for better accuracy. It depends on the user, right? Depends on the use case. But having this tool in your sort of toolbox in itself is very useful, because if you have to improve the performance of a prompt, if you have to improve the performance of a model, this is what you're going to do, right? And then there are a few more, by the way, like there is tree of thought architecture, which is like deploying 3 different experts answering the question. But here, rather than arriving at the answer, and you see like how researchers have been so like, I don't know, like some of these things actually amazes you when you think about it. This is very similar to how we humans learn problem solving, right? And this is exactly, these are the patterns which are working in case of LLMs also. So what you end up realizing is rather than arriving at the final answer, researchers said, what if for 3 different paths, we let it be like a tree, like do the first step, check. Do the second step, check. Do the third step, check. And at different points, if somebody does not sort of agree, right? Like discard that. So it's basically 3 different experts answering the question. All experts will write down step 1 of their thinking, then share it with the group. Then they will go to next step and all that. And if any expert realizes they are wrong at any point, they leave. Right? So you have basically 3 experts starting. And first expert is coming with the first level of answer. Second expert is coming with 4 different answers. And third is not starting at all, actually. Like, but here, for example, like the moment you realize that in this particular step, three of them, 2 of them are agreeing, 1 is not agreeing, you just stop that chain of thought. Let the 2 sort of continue and generate multiple solutions and so on and so forth. So what you'll end up realizing is before converging to the solution, you can, by the way, you can do it like this also, both ways, right? If you're getting a little confused, that's fine, but you can do it both ways. You can say that 3 experts starting at any point of time. If 2 of them agree, the third one does not agree, they leave, right? This is ensuring 2 things. One, the entire system is moving step by step, which means that it is using COT. And the second thing is like it is saving tokens on the wrong paths. But you could even be more creative and say that rather than 3 experts doing like one solution, I would say like 3 experts, 3 models generating multiple solutions. And at any point of time, one thread looks like it has gone totally off, that thread stops, and we move ahead with other threads. For example, these threads stop, and then we move ahead with other threads. So rather than trying to remember a particular sort of how it works, I would suggest like you understand like the beauty of basically how people are thinking about making prompts more effective. Because once you start getting that, anytime somebody tells you that LLM does not give good output in this case, your brain will never be like, yeah, it does not give. You're like, is there a way that I can instruct LLM so that I can give this kind of output? So rather than being in a fixed mindset when it comes to LLMs do this well, they don't do this well. Rather than being in a fixed mindset, you can come into a growth mindset, which is, let me at least try. Maybe like people are saying it does not work, but maybe if I apply tree of thought, it might work. Or maybe if I apply COT, it might work. Plain vanilla like ChatGPT or Plot does not work, that's fine. But what if I apply these techniques in the chat window? Will that work? Maybe. All right. Uh, let me check if there are any questions and then I will. Okay. it's not related to this. So what I will do is that rather than sort of explaining you one particular technique, right? I think if you get any broader question on these techniques, I'm happy to help you. The last thing before sort of we get into Q&A is basically the prompt chaining, which is basically if you have a multi-step multi-step task, and this is something that you can see in like the deep research mode. In deep research mode, it first breaks this particular deep research into 5 different pieces. Then for those 5 different pieces, it is following its own sort of path. And finally, it synthesizes everything, right? So that is basically multi-agent deployment and then finally conversion. We'll cover it when we talk about agentic. It's very easy to confuse that with prompt chaining. Prompt chaining is not that. Prompt chaining is saying that the second step is dependent on first step and third step is dependent on second step, right? But let me, rather than sort of giving this entire thing in one go and LLM working on this entire thing, let me ask it to work sequentially. And when the output of first step is done, then it goes to second, then third, then fourth, then five, right? There's not like deep research, which is more of like deploying multiple things in parallel and then synthesizing, right? This is more like chaining prompts into one another, creating a large chain, and then sort of going in that chain from one place to another, right? And this is really good at synthesis tasks. For example, you have done some user research and you're asking it to do synthesis on your behalf. Rather than asking it, just give me a summary, you can actually say, as the first step, like go and figure out the themes. And then among these themes, go and find verbatim things that people have said, attach them to the themes, and then write a really good summary for it. And then do this and then do this. What you'll end up realizing, the output that you get through this way is way better as compared to you write all of these things at once and give this instruction to LLM. Right? So prompt chaining is very, very useful that way, which is like you can break any large task into smaller tasks and you can follow that, right? Again, before I conclude this, right, the only thing like the conclusion for this entire section is if you ask me, my advice to you is going to be like, go to this place, find this paper, take this paper, go to this place, put it inside, or put this paper into LLM, I think, and then start sort of understanding this paper. Because what you'll realize is, this is more of an overview paper, systematic survey. And this has, like, these sort of papers have helped me a lot. Like even in my third year intern at ITC, like research papers helped me a lot in building whatever like chemical engineering project I was working with. So it's very, very useful if you can figure out which of these techniques. There are around 45 techniques in this. I would suggest like 25 of them are actually useful for you. Which of these techniques are actually useful for you? And you don't need to remember them. As long as you understand, like I said, you don't need to even understand all of them. As long as you know the first layer, which is this kind of technique is used, this place, this kind of technique is used, this place, this kind of technique is used, this place, right? So build that mental model and build that growth mindset that any problem, LLMs can be made reliable. You can get really good output from LLMs as long as you are able to write a good prompt. And which is why I said, once you understand this topic, rest of the 9 sections become very, very easy. If you don't understand this topic, if you don't learn how to write good prompts, rest of the sort of 9 sessions are meaningless, right? I would like even go to that extent to put that disclaimer, right? Like I said, we'll keep revisiting these things, which is why I didn't want to spend time in explaining exactly how it works, how all of these things on the slide work, because I do believe that it's better that you understand the importance of the topic, you understand where to get additional information from, how to read this, and then finally, what all to focus on, right? Now, coming to this particular thing, before I start, what you will end up realizing is, based on what you have understood, you can use few things in this prompt, right? You can even say that And this is the beauty of LLMs, right? Define this prompt. First of all, you can start using delimiters. Use techniques. By the way, if you just ask it to use prompt engineering techniques, it will not be that great job, right? Use techniques such as chain of thought. A really good will be basically prompt chaining. Another one that not tree of thought, but tree of thought would be very complex for this one. But what you can do is self-consistency. If possible. First, let's discuss. Then now see it starts thinking. Here it gave you the output, right? And which is why I'm saying it's a brilliant Jarvis. Like LLMs are like Jarvis equivalent. There are terrific like interns, but there are like terrible masters. So the entire quality of the discussion will change from here. And in the next session, again, we are going to continue with the same thing. And I'll show you like how the final skill looks like for me. And then you can go and build your own skill, borrow and build your own skill. But my point is the way we are using LLMs to write PRD. I've been in opposition of using LLMs for writing PRD. And that's because most of the times we are using LLMs to write PRD. But there is a right way to actually write those PRDs so that you benefit a lot from LLMs, right? And that is the way we are going to learn. But see, now it starts thinking, and actually you start feeling, yeah, premium filters is ambiguous, right? But it could mean that it's available to like paid subscribers, a premium tier of filters or premium UX. Some of it will be like not very useful, but that's fine. You're exploring, right? Remember what I said. When you're writing a PRD, you don't want to sort of converge onto something. If you're converging onto something, you are already done with PRD. You're writing a PRD to think. And LLMs are one of the best like thinking partners available 24/7 for you. Caught is where it starts, but it will follow others also, right? So my point is start exploring LLMs and you'll be happier for it.